This tutorial is going to be to supplement the other tutorials that I've made in Photoshop that walk you through kind of the basics and the kind of the quick starts for Photoshop. Then it also could be used for a lot of other different kinds of software like GIMP or Affinity, but I'm just going to make it for Photoshop. So I encourage you to look at the other videos first before getting into this one, and then this one will kind of make a little bit more sense because I'm going to go kind of quick in how to set this lesson redesign project up. So initially we're going to go to our project folder and week 3 assignment, and if we look at that, we've got some reading and the chats and web link, but this specific project is really going to be concentrating on the CARP, the contrast, alignment, repetition, proximity. But how do you play that out using Photoshop? So I'm going to give you the information from last week that you would like you're going to pretend that you're going to be making that lesson maybe for some sort of publication, and you're going to redesign it. So I'm going to give you the raw materials, and so if we come down here, we have some technical requirements here. So we're going to make it 8.5 by 11. The resolution is going to be 300 pixels per inch. It's going to be an RGB color space. This would change if you were going to actually have it printed commercially. So you would want to probably go CMYK. More specifically, you would want to talk to your printer specifically how they want the design set up, and probably they would have a bleed and some other technical requirements. But for this project, we're just kind of getting started. We are going to have a 1/2 inch margin, and that's where you're going to use the view tool and then show rulers, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And we're going to rasterize the type, and again, if you look at my videos on type and rasterization, why would we do it and why would we not do it? So we wouldn't do it in a commercial setting, but for turning things in, that's what we're going to do. So you'll have to look at that video again or review that. We're going to save it as JPEG as well as in the native file format. So you could save it as a PDF, but the native file format is PSD, which is a Photoshop document. So we always want to save it in the whatever program's native file, because then that gives us the most flexibility to go in and rework it. A JPEG flattens everything. It's really good because it's small and compressed and it's one layer, but that's not good for redesigning. So you want to save it both ways, and you can save it and submit the JPEG, but you're going to definitely want to use the PSD or Affinity's own native file format or GIMP's native file format to keep in case you need to make some revisions. So that I've got down here. We've got in this folder, we've got the redesign raw material. And so we're going to come back and revisit this. So this is kind of a pared down version of what I actually gave you, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with a bunch of different links. So let's go back into Photoshop here for a second. We're going to set our file up as file new, and we're going to go to 8.5 by 11. Make sure this is not set for pixels. Make sure it's in inches. There are some presets here in photo and film, and we've talked about that in another video. But we're going to 8.5 by 11 by 300. We're going to stay in RGB color space. If we're going to make it CMYK or some other color space, we could change it here, and we're just going to leave everything this way. So we're going to hit OK. And one of the first things we want to do is set up our margin. So I said a 1/2 inch margin. So we can go to View, and I already have Show Rulers on. So if I click that off, the rulers up here at the top and the side are gone. If we go to Show Rulers, then it comes on. Now in the simplest form, we could just click in the ruler, left click, drag, and we can create this blue line. A more technical way, I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that, or Control Z, whichever way you like to pronounce it. A more technical way is to go to New Guide, and then we can type it in. So the vertical one we're going to type in as 0.5, and it will put it exactly at 0.5, view, new guide, and we'll make it at exactly 8 inches. And we'll do the same for the horizontal. Now the blue line comes from it's kind of legacy, how we used to do pre-press. We had to draw everything out. We had to photograph it to make the printing plate, and they used something special called a non-photo blue pencil. You still see this a little bit with cartooning. You'll see like a cartooning book, and the cartoonist or the comic book artist will draw everything in this light blue color, and then they'll ink back over top of it. And when they go to photograph that to make a printing plate, that blue is a blue that is such that the camera doesn't pick it up, so you don't have to worry about erasing or anything. It's just going to pick up the black final artwork. And so that's just kind of a legacy. Actually, in Photoshop, you can change these and make them whatever color you want now. But in any case, these guides are not going to print, so you could send it clearly to a printer confidently, where those aren't going to print, and you can leave them in the file. But definitely going to be a source for help to align things. And so we can pull other ones on if we wanted to make one, in the center. We'd make it at 4 1/4 inches. If we wanted a gutter, if we were going to make 2 columns, I would probably come over here and make like a 1/2 inch gutter, and the gutter is the space between columns. So I could bring those in. If I want to pull a horizontal in here to align certain elements, I could. And then equally, if I don't want those in there, I can go to the move tool, click on it, and I can I get this little double line cursor, and I can just pull it up and move it off. I can also go to view, clear guides. I wish I could just turn them off. Illustrator you can. In Photoshop you just clear them, and that's not really what I want to do at the moment. So I'm going to clear these middle ones out just for this, so that we're not being confused. So then I'm going to go back to my raw material, and I'm going to start, and there's a variety of ways, and again, look at that type video and tutorial, and it kind of walks you through how to get text in. But I like to bring in elements individually, so that I can manipulate them and I can move them around a little bit more. I mean, theoretically, I suppose you could just drag all of this in, copy it all, plop it in, and then move things around, but that would, I think, be much more difficult, even though this appears on the surface to be a little bit more complicated. So if you want to type it in yourself, that's fine, but I'm just going to use copy and paste. So I'm going to use shortcut keys, and Photoshop is really all about being quick and never having your hand leave the mouse. So one hand is going to be on the mouse, the other hand is going to manipulate shortcut keys, and if you're going to be using this very often, then you're going to want to use shortcut keys. So I'm using this with my left hand, using it primarily with my ring finger and my thumb, or my ring finger and index finger, or some sort of combination. But so I'm going to hit Control, which is on the bottom left hand corner of my keyboard, or I think it's Command in Mac, C, which C like Charlie, and that copies it. And then I can come over here, and I'm going to get my text tool. I'm going to, oh, there we go, click in here anywhere, and you can see that it makes its own layer. If I'm going to draw anything, then I have to make a new layer myself, but text always makes its own layer. And I'm going to make sure that this is something reasonable, so it doesn't just explode on my page. I might just make it up 14 point, because I know it's going to be a little bit bigger. And I can leave it at some font, and we can determine that a little bit later. And here's where some people get confused sometimes, depending on how you left Photoshop. The text color is right here, not over here as in some of the other tutorials. The text color is here, and it's white. So if I hit Control V as in Victor and paste it, and then it looks like there's nothing there, but it was really actually just white text. So I want to click there, and I want to change it to some other color. So then I'm going to hit Control V as in Victor or paste, and there's EDCT 6002. And then I can hit this check mark, and that commits it. So I can go back to the move tool. If you're a really good shortcut person, you can always hit just the key V. So if I'm at if I'm on some other tool and I want to quickly switch to the move tool, I hit just the key V, and that automatically switches to that. And so now I have that selected. I want to probably take auto select off, so I want to make sure that I'm only moving the layer that I want to move. So I have to select it over here, and then I can move it. So then we'll go over back again to here. I'm going to grab my name, Control C, back to the text tool, click one time, hit Control V as in Victor again, and there's that, and hit the check mark to accept that new revision. Then we'll do this, and see, it seems a little tedious to do it this way, but that allows me then to move these all around independently, and I can decide if I want it over here or down here or wherever I want it. I can move it around, and if I just copy and paste the entire selection, then it's going to be kind of immovable. I'll do one more here. Let's do this real quick. And I have double monitors, so that's why I keep going off the screen. What did I just get? Okay, the reading. This is still a another subhead. So I encourage you to, again, revisit that modular scale and modular text. I left off my video there, but come back to that. Check out the modular text. See how you're going to scale and size your text. But now, if we talk about large amounts of text, just like this whole paragraph, then we need to input the text a little bit differently, like the video previously showed. If I click on the T, and instead of just clicking and then hitting V, look what happens to the text when I do that. It goes way off the side, and it's very difficult to resize, and I start having to hit enter, and that just causes a whole lot of trouble. So here's what we really need to do. Cancel that. I want to click and I want to drag approximately, it can be way bigger than it needs to be, but approximately the spacing here, and then I'm going to hit Control V, and then it constrains that type. And I'm not going to go into this a great deal. I don't need this box any too big. Just remember that if I, oops, if I need to rework that, I can click on the T again, and that brings these bounding boxes up. And if I make this too small, then I get this little X over here, which means that there's more text to be revealed. So I encourage you to look at that video ahead again if you're having trouble with revealing all the text. So now I have all this these abilities to move things around. Now if you're going to be using you're not going to necessarily be able to do an interactive one here unless you're going to use InDesign, and some of you are probably not to that point where you're using InDesign, which is really the page layout tool of choice. So in my original one, the Santa Maria response is actually a hyperlink. So you may need to go in and get a URL. So the trouble with the URL for this is it's a huge one, which is going to take up much more space. It's not going to be very clean. So I've also giving you information, if you haven't already seen that, as pull that up. There's some information on making tiny URLs, and I think I have that. right there. So you may do some research there on how to condense a large URL into something small and manageable. Because if you're doing this in Photoshop, we don't have that ability to make that interactive. So you might want to change this to a blue and make, say, Santa Maria response, and then put the actual tiny URL in there so that somebody could access that. So I would go ahead and continue to do this and bring in all my information. But I'm just going to kind of walk you through here a couple more things here, how to get started. So let's say that we wanted a big color block behind here as a header. So I would make a new layer, and I'm going to drag this layer. I'm left clicking and dragging below everything else so that I can reorder my layers, so that if I make like a Ohio University green behind here, that it's not going to cover up my text. I can use my rectangle marquee tool, which is described in those other tutorials as well, and maybe drag this out. And I don't know what OU's specific color is right at the moment. I'm just going to use this one. Hit OK, and then again I could use the paint bucket tool, or I could just use a shortcut, which is Alt backspace, and that's the shortcut for fill, and that fills with whatever the foreground color is. And I can hit Control D as deselect, gets rid of my marching ants, that selection. Now that doesn't look very good, and we need to move it around a little bit. So again, I can move this around. I don't want any text to go beyond the ½ margin. So possibly as I move along here, I may want to make this a little bit bigger. So I could, and this is a little bit confusing here, I could come and grab every layer and drag it down, and I have to choose a layer over here. Now every tool has its shortcomings and it has its advantages. So there's another tool up here that says auto select. That means if I actually click on that layer, it will automatically select over here in the layers palette. So that can be a little bit faster to get things moved around a little bit. There's also another way, if I wanted to move all this whole group, is I can click and I can hold Control down and click the exact layers that I want to move or want to select. Now they're all kind of together, and now they all move collectively. If I wanted to make that a little bit more permanent, I would come down to the little chain link here, and that would link them, and that way I could even click off of them and I come back on and they're still linked. If I ever want to unlink them, then I would select them all again and hit the chain link, and it'll remove that. So I wanted a little bit more room there. I'm going to make my head a little bit bigger, and again, it's in other tutorials, but I'm going to hit Control T to transform. I could also go to Edit and Transform, but I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so I have a little bit more room to make that header. And then EDCT 620, I want to modify that text. I want to double click on that. I think I'm going to make it white. So I click up here, I can choose a white color, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So let's say 30 point. And for this purpose, I'm just going to leave it as Arial, and I might make it bold. I could say accept, and then move it down a little bit. Now my name's in the wrong place, so I can just come over and select that, bring it down. I could put OU's logo here or whatever I'd like. Now I can revisit this, and let's say that I want maybe like my own custom bullet, maybe a little square here. So I could click and drag, and I think in the other tutorials again, if I want a perfect circle, I hold the Shift key down, makes it a perfect square, or if I'm using the elliptical marquee tool, it's a perfect or like a perfect circle. And I want to fill that in, so I could go Alt backspace, but nothing happens because I'm on a text layer and I can't draw or paint on a text layer. So I need to make a new layer, and I'm going to drag it on down. Now I can fill it, Alt backspace. So I can make that a custom one. Now, if you're going to use a lot of different colors, here's one thing that I don't know that I've mentioned. If I go into my swatches palette, which is up here, or if you don't see it, you can go to Window and turn on swatches. I have a lot of other colors because I was doing some digital painting. Yours would be way smaller, but if you drag down enough here, I can add a new swatch. So there's my color that I chose, my OU blue or green. Click on this. I can name it OU green. Hit OK, and now it's down here. So if I choose some other color, so I'm choosing red, and red is over here, but I want to come back and do something with my green. All I have to do is come in my swatches and click on that, and now I've got that exact same green again. One other advantage here, putting everything on layers, is here's my, maybe I can rename that by double clicking on the word and saying first bullet. Now if I right click, I can copy that layer, duplicate it. I can also, that makes a new layer, so now it's right on top of the old one, so it looks like I didn't do anything, but really it's here. Or I can just click on it and drag it into a new layer right here, right beside the trash can. That makes a new layer as well, and I can have another bullet. So you know, you might use some simple accents like that to help divide part of your project up. If I want to come in and make something maybe a different color green, like maybe this is let's say it's a URL here. I'm going to go to that paragraph, and then let's say I'm just making up a HTTP tinyurl.com. And so I want to definitely denote that as a hyperlink, but I don't definitely want the underline. I can still select just portion of that text, and if I really wanted to, I could make it that green as well. So I click up here because I want to change the text color, and instead of going here and finding that color, all I have to do is go back into my swatches, click on that green swatch, and then hit OK. And now it's clear that that's something different, and it kind of clues in the reader that, hey, that is something different. Maybe it's a URL. So I can also, like right now, it's not very readable, so I could double click on it. Again, I could select just that portion, and I can change that to bold as well, or italics, or bold italics, or whatever my font supports right there. So it's going to be a lot cleaner, a lot neater. There are a lot of YouTube videos on manipulating all different kinds of things, but that's the general gist. So what I'm looking for is you to experiment a little bit with Photoshop for the first time, and see if you can visually chunk up the information that I gave you that wasn't very pretty in a better way. And so I've provided a lot of examples in the folder as well, in that week 3 folder of some other students. I've also gotten video critiques of other students' work, so you can kind of see where I'm going and what I'm looking for and how I'm going to be critiquing you. So if you have any other questions, you can email me. But please look at the videos that I've already posted about just beginning Photoshop. Hopefully this gets you started. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with.